Dementia is a term we hear often, but what does it truly mean? Well, it's not a single disease. Instead, it's a general term for the loss of memory, language, problem-solving, and other thinking abilities that are severe enough to interfere with daily life. Imagine your brain as a vast, intricate library filled with a lifetime of memories, knowledge, and skills. Dementia is like a slow, creeping fire that begins to burn the books, smudge the words, and eventually cause entire sections of the library to crumble. This loss is not just about forgetting where you put your keys, it's about forgetting the faces of loved ones, the stories of your life, and even how to perform simple, everyday tasks. The rising rates of dementia in the United States are a serious public health crisis that demands our urgent attention. As our population ages, the number of people living with this condition is growing at an alarming rate. We need to ask ourselves what environmental factors could be contributing to this devastating trend, pushing us to look for answers in places we might not have considered before. A groundbreaking new study from researchers in California has sent a clear and startling wake-up call to all of us. This research shines a spotlight on a hidden danger that millions of people are exposed to every year: wildfire smoke. For years, we've known that smoke from these massive fires is bad for our lungs and our hearts. But this new study suggests the damage goes much deeper, reaching into the most protected and complex organ in our body, the brain. The study, published in a respected medical journal, followed a large group of older adults living across California over several years. The researchers carefully tracked their exposure to wildfire smoke, specifically the fine particulate matter it contains. The results were sobering. The scientists found a significant link between higher exposure to wildfire smoke and an increased risk of developing dementia. What makes this California study so important is its scale and its focus. California has experienced some of the most destructive and frequent wildfires in recent history. The researchers were able to use satellite data and air quality monitoring stations to create a detailed map of smoke exposure. This new evidence forces us to rethink the full scope of the wildfire crisis. It's no longer just an environmental issue or a threat to property. It's a profound public health emergency, with potential neurological consequences we are only beginning to understand. So, what exactly is in wildfire smoke that makes it so dangerous? It's not just a simple cloud of ash and soot. It's a complex and toxic mixture of gases and tiny particles created when wood, buildings, and other materials burn. But the component that scientists are most concerned about for our health is something called particulate matter, specifically PM2.5. The PM stands for particulate matter, and the 2.5 refers to its size, 2.5 micrometers or smaller. This is unimaginably small, about 30 times smaller than the diameter of a single human hair. These PM2.5 particles are the invisible enemy within the smoke. Because they're so incredibly tiny, they can bypass our body's natural defense systems. But PM2.5 particles are so fine that they can slip past these defenses with ease. They travel deep into our lungs, settling in the delicate air sacs where oxygen enters our bloodstream. The real danger of PM2.5, however, lies in its ability to go even further. Once these microscopic particles enter the deepest parts of our lungs, they're small enough to pass directly into our bloodstream. Think of it like a key slipping through a tiny lock. Once in the circulation, they can travel throughout the entire body, reaching every single organ, including the heart, and most troublingly, the brain. This is what makes PM2.5 a systemic threat. It doesn't just stay in one place, it carries inflammation and toxic chemicals with it, delivering them to our most vital systems. Once these tiny PM2.5 particles are in your bloodstream, how do they manage to get into the brain? The brain is protected by a special shield known as the blood-brain barrier. This is a tightly woven network of cells that lines the blood vessels in the brain, acting as a very selective gatekeeper. Its job is to let essential nutrients in while keeping harmful toxins, viruses, and bacteria out. For a long time, scientists believed this barrier was nearly impenetrable. However, we're now learning that it can be weakened and breached, especially by the kind of intense, systemic inflammation caused by pollutants like PM2.5. These ultrafine particles can damage the brain in a few different ways. First, they can directly cross a weakened blood-brain barrier and enter the brain tissue itself. Once inside, these foreign particles can trigger an immune response from the brain's own specialized immune cells, called microglia. This leads to neuroinflammation, or inflammation within the brain. While short-term inflammation is a normal part of healing, chronic neuroinflammation is incredibly destructive. It can damage and kill neurons. the brain cells that transmit information. Another way PM2.5 can harm the brain is by causing damage to the blood vessels that supply it with oxygen and nutrients. The inflammation caused by these particles can make blood vessels stiff and narrow, a condition known as atherosclerosis. This reduces blood flow to the brain. This process can lead to what are called silent strokes, which are tiny areas of brain damage that might not cause immediate symptoms but can accumulate over time, leading to significant cognitive decline. You might be thinking, isn't all pollution bad? What makes wildfire smoke so different? Well, it is true that air pollution from sources like traffic exhaust and industrial factories is also a known health risk. However, emerging research suggests that the PM2.5 from wildfires might be even more toxic to our bodies and brains. The reason lies in what is being burned. Wildfire smoke is not just from burning trees, it's from the complete combustion of entire ecosystems, including the soil, vegetation, and increasingly, our own communities. When wildfires sweep through towns and neighborhoods, they burn much more than just wood. They incinerate homes, cars, plastics, electronics, and all the synthetic materials that make up our modern world. This creates a far more complex and dangerous chemical cocktail than pollution from burning fossil fuels alone. The smoke from these fires can contain heavy metals like lead and mercury, as well as highly toxic chemicals from burning plastics and insulation. These additional toxins can amplify the harmful effects of the PM2.5 particles, making each particle potentially more damaging than one from a car's tailpipe. Furthermore, the intensity and concentration of wildfire smoke exposure are often much higher than for typical urban pollution. A wildfire event can cause PM2.5 levels to skyrocket to hundreds or even thousands of times above the normal baseline. Finally, the reach of wildfire smoke is vast and unpredictable. While urban pollution is often concentrated around highways and industrial zones, wildfire smoke can travel for thousands of miles, affecting communities far from the fire itself. This widespread, episodic nature of the threat makes it a difficult public health challenge to manage, exposing millions of people who may not even realize their air is hazardous, and making the link to long-term health outcomes like dementia a national, not just regional concern. Like so many environmental health threats, the dangers of wildfire smoke are not shared equally across our society. The burden of this exposure, and therefore the increased risk for dementia, falls most heavily on our most vulnerable populations. Low-income communities and communities of color are often disproportionately affected. These communities are more likely to be located in areas with higher overall pollution levels to begin with. Economic factors play a huge role in determining a person's level of exposure and their ability to protect themselves. People with lower incomes are more likely to live in older, less insulated housing that offers poor protection from smoke seeping indoors. They may not have central air conditioning or be able to afford the high-efficiency air purifiers that can significantly improve indoor air quality. During a smoke event, public health officials advise people to stay inside, but if your home is just as smoky as the outdoors, this advice offers little protection. Furthermore, many people in low-income communities work in jobs that require them to be outdoors, such as agriculture, construction, or landscaping. They cannot simply stay home from work when the air quality is poor. This means they face prolonged, high-level exposure to wildfire smoke while on the job, putting their health at direct risk. For these essential workers, the choice is often between their health and their paycheck, an impossible decision that no one should have to make. This unequal burden is a critical issue of environmental justice. We have a moral obligation to ensure that everyone, regardless of their income, race, or where they live, has the right to breathe clean air and the resources to protect their brain health from this growing environmental threat. The threat of wildfires is not going away. In fact, it is getting worse. The science is clear that climate change is a primary driver of this escalating crisis. Rising global temperatures are leading to more frequent and intense heat waves, which dry out forests and grasslands, turning them into perfect fuel for fires. We are also seeing longer fire seasons than ever before. What used to be a problem confined to a few months in the late summer and fall is now a year-round threat in many parts of the country. The numbers are truly staggering and paint a concerning picture of our future. In recent years, we have seen record-breaking fire seasons, with tens of millions of acres burned across North America. These so-called megafires, which burn over 100,000 acres, are becoming more common and are incredibly difficult to control. They generate enormous plumes of smoke that can impact air quality across the entire continent. As this trend continues, the number of people exposed to hazardous levels of wildfire smoke will continue to climb. This escalating wildfire crisis intersects with our nation's demographic trends in a very dangerous way. The United States population is aging, with the number of adults over 65 projected to increase dramatically in the coming decades. Currently, nearly 7 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's disease. Without a medical breakthrough, that number is projected to soar to nearly 13 million by the year 2050. We are at a critical crossroads. The future health of our aging population is on a collision course with a worsening climate-driven wildfire crisis. The smoke we breathe today could be determining the health of our brains tomorrow. While the scale of the wildfire problem can feel overwhelming, there are practical, simple steps you can take to protect yourself and your family when smoke is in the air. The most important strategy is to reduce your exposure as much as possible. This starts with staying informed. Pay close attention to local air quality reports, which are available online through websites like airnow.gov. These reports use a color-coded system to tell you how clean or polluted your air is. When you see that air quality is in the unhealthy range, it is a signal to take action and change your daily routine to limit your time breathing the contaminated air. The most effective way to reduce your exposure is to stay indoors as much as you can, with the windows and doors closed. This creates a barrier between you and the polluted outside air. However, smoke can still seep into homes, so creating a clean room is a great next step. This can be a bedroom or other small room where you can run a portable air purifier with a HEPA filter. HEPA filters are designed to capture tiny particles, including the dangerous PM2.5 from smoke. Spending most of your time in this room during a smoke event can significantly lower the amount of pollution you breathe. If you absolutely must go outside during a smoke event, wearing the right kind of mask is crucial. Simple cloth masks or surgical masks do not provide adequate protection from PM2.5 particles. The best option is a well-fitting N95 or P100 respirator mask. These masks are designed to filter out at least 95% of airborne particles when worn correctly. During fire season, it is a good idea to have a supply of these masks on hand for every member of your family. Finally, avoid activities that add more pollution to your indoor air. This means you should not burn candles, use gas stoves, or even vacuum, as these activities can stir up particles that are already inside your home. The goal is to make your indoor environment a safe haven from the smoke outside. Taking these protective measures seriously can reduce your personal exposure to harmful pollutants and lower your risk of both short-term symptoms and potential long-term damage to your lungs, heart, and brain. The discovery of a link between wildfire smoke and dementia is a profound call to action that we cannot afford to ignore. It transforms wildfires from a distant environmental issue into an immediate and personal threat to our cognitive health and well-being. Knowing that the air we breathe could be silently damaging our brains must galvanize us to demand and create change on a much larger scale. While individual protective measures are important, they are not enough. We need bold and comprehensive solutions that address this crisis at its source and protect every community, especially the most vulnerable. This requires a two-pronged approach. First, we must aggressively combat the root causes of worsening wildfires, which means taking serious action on climate change. This involves transitioning to clean energy, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and investing in sustainable practices. At the same time, we need to invest more in proactive forest management and fire prevention strategies. This includes prescribed burns to reduce fuel loads and creating more fire-resilient landscapes and communities. These are not simple or easy solutions, but they are absolutely necessary if we want to reduce the frequency and intensity of the fires that produce this toxic smoke. Second, we must strengthen our public health defenses to protect people when smoke events do occur. This means expanding our air quality monitoring networks so that every community has access to real-time local data. We need to fund programs that help low-income households and vulnerable individuals access air purifiers and better filtration systems for their homes. Public policy should support the creation of community clean air shelters. We must ensure that outdoor workers are provided with proper respiratory protection and that workplace safety standards are updated to account for this growing hazard. Ultimately, protecting our brains from wildfire smoke is a collective responsibility. It requires action from individuals, communities, and governments at all levels. We must raise awareness, educate our neighbors, and advocate for policies that prioritize clean air and public health. The science has given us a clear warning. Now it is up to us to respond with the urgency and determination this threat deserves. This is not a fight we can win alone. By working together, we can build a healthier, more resilient future, where clean air is not a luxury, but a fundamental right for all, safeguarding our bodies and our minds for generations to come.